October 14, 2163. 3:50 AJST. Sapporo, Japan. District 43. Escape from the rigid buzz of mind disruption is an only child of the night, the pocket of soft hours from the fall of darkness to dawn, a nightly caress of a dream's refreshment. Amiya Len's only solace was found there, at the top of every spinning cycle of the earth, a slice of time kept from the endless churning of bumps and chirps and the tick-bites of machine notifications. Life in the augmented world. Her soft, straight black hair laid down across either shoulder, reaching down to her elbows as hung in the deepest recesses of sleep. The soft, orange lights inside her resting pod oscillated with the slowness of the moon's tide, coddling her rest. A gentle flow of traffic, a snaking line of hoverpods, hummed by outside the window pane next to her. Then it hit. Her head lurched as an alarm ripped a dagger of wretched sounds into her sleeping pod. She sat up immediately, tearing herself from her sleep and smashing her head against the aluminum surface of the shelf above. "What the hell?" she muttered to herself, wiping the sleep from her eyes. The wailing alarm rolled in an upward and downward crescendo, over and over. Code 12 in progress. Soliciting outside assistance. Code 12 in progress. Soliciting outside assistance. She swung her legs out from the side of her bed pod and jumped over to the communications terminal at the side of her office's door. Jamming her finger on the talk button, she yelled into an empty, black screen. "Unigen, what's going on out there?" The crudely pixelated image of a round, middle face materialized on the screen. Unigen, Amiya's mechanoid. He was the product of resourceful and creative mind, condemned to years of a lonely, impoverished adolescence. The struggle to thrive in the desolate outer districts of Sapporo, a Tier 3 city of New Japan, forced her to adapt. To improvise. To set herself apart. And the black market of second-hand parts and Unigen's modular design made it possible for her to bring her synthetic visions into reality. A glowing ring of blue LED lights projected out from each of his two eyes. They both sat atop shelf-like cheekbones, running horizontally from the side of his artificial nose to the outer edges of his face. A perfectly smooth and bald head rested on strong shoulders as his mouth yapped off a lazy string of urgent words. "Good morning, Amiya. Sorry to bother you. The conflict alarm was the only thing working in your room." Amiya rubbed the top of her forehead. "I hope whatever you've got is worth the bruising I'm gonna have tomorrow. I just picked it up on the police scanners, could be a good one. A suspect tied to a theft of sensitive property has been spotted in our district, in Sakura Park." Amiya swiped Unigen's face to the side and pulled up a new window on her control terminal, one that showed a list of pending jobs. At the top of the list, highlighted and in bold text, was the job he was raving about. Next to it was the tag premium pay. Could be a saucy one, she thought. It's been 7 months since Amiya started to pick up contract work with the Sapporo District 24 police force. She could only pull in so many credits with her mechanoid repair shop, so she picked up another hat to wear, adapting to thrive. And the police were more than happy to add her, the mechanoid whisperer, to their talent pool. She didn't mind taking the jobs, as long as she was going after the right people. She swiped back to Unigen's face. "You sure this one's hot and on?" "Yeah, have a look for yourself. Facial recognition scanning has pulled, a preliminary match, Naruhito Fujiwara. Age, 24 years. Unigen's face dissolved into a live drone video feed. She watched from the elevated view as a ragged and disheveled man walked discreetly amongst the small groups of elderly walkers now filling the park. A large, brown jacket hung over the sides of his small and slender frame. He wore no shirt underneath, and a pair of oversized jeans hung around his hips with no belt. Across his waist was fastened a small, burgundy-red satchel with a pulsating green light atop the latch holding it closed. As the emerging light from the morning sun fell down against him, he casted a tall man's shadow across the rain-soaked concrete footpath behind him. "All right, take the job and get in here, ASAP." She lifted her finger from the talk button and ran to her wardrobe. She pulled her duty uniform out, and lifted a pair of black, smart fiber pants up over her hips. As she zipped the matching torso cover on, the words Sapporo Police, District 43 in cracked letters hung across her back. In front of the mirror, she quickly pulled her hair back into a simple, efficient bun. The door slid open and Unijin walked in with his signature stiff trot. He stood upright at 185 centimeters, with a full, muscular profile. Curved, metal plates covered his chest, his limbs, his scalp, all the parts of his body holding his vital bits. In between, the wiring and small hydraulic pumps became visible in the brief gaps of his movements. Though he was designed a few, long years ago, Amiya had the foresight to piece him together with an imposing look that would shock the nerves of its targets into a state of helplessness. You need to wield a visceral and terminal fear to get by in the streets of outer Sapporo, and having Unijin around gave her just this kind of immunity. He was a street warrior. Her street warrior. "Get me the briefing," she commanded. "All right, accessing, now." Unijin faced straight ahead as his eyes darted left and right, scanning an exclusive, internal view. Response received from Central Dispatch: "We are, requested to engage the target with district eyes on us. They are prepared to provide, contingency support." "Shit," Amiya said. "The higher-ups are watching on this one. It better go our way or we won't be getting another job anytime soon." She bent down and picked up a battered, black helmet from beneath her desk and placed it on her head. On the back of it, black spray paint scrawled in stenciled letters spelled out "Tactical Comms." And a bundle of a dozen, finger-fat cables ran out from below the label, down along the floor to the other side of the room, like a slithering snake frozen in place. She pulled the helmet up to her head and looked towards Unijin. "All right, let it rip. You're free to engage on this one." The giddy, metallic menace bowed his head in acknowledgement. "I'm ready for, a little excitement," his mechanized voice rang out. He walked over to a gun locker against the wall and pulled out pieces of armor, retrieving torso coverings, sheaths for his limbs, and a tactical reserve helmet made of a dense metallic alloy. The armor was old and worn, but trusted. 4 long years of street fighting the living dredge of Sapporo were burnt into them. It was the only levee of protection between Unijin and the enduring tides of death which swelled in the depths of urban poverty and crime plaguing the district. Amiya reached behind her head and flipped a switch to activate her helmet. Her view of the room quickly dimmed, and was replaced with a visual feed taken directly from Unijin's optical sensors. She observed herself sit at her desk. "Time to go, Unijin. Take to the air, we need to get there right away." "You got it, let's burn some plasma, baby." She heard Unijin's words sprawled across the scroll of her own mind. She was linked up directly and telepathically with his comms CPU, bypassing the need for speakers and auditory signals. "All right, I am en route and airborne. I had to ditch the heavy weaponry for this one, got to stay nimble." "Got it, we're going in bare bones. Should be a nice challenge for you." "Always keeping it exciting, that's my modus operandi." Through Unijin's eyes, the upward trajectory of the structures of Megalopolis seemed to stretch into infinity, up into the thick, dingy air above. More pedestrians were filling the streets, blotting out the sidewalk with their opaque force-field umbrellas. Endless chains of transport craft hung in lines stretching out as far as the heavy flow of rainfall would allow him to see. Boosters engaged. Woo! Unijin jumped up, throwing his heavy body into the air. And with a jolting, explosive sound, a thick piece of metal casing ejected itself from the bottom of his feet, revealing the miniature plasma pulse propulsion engines built into them. He tilted his head back, looked upwards, and engaged the propulsion drive, sending himself soaring up into the meandering lanes of traffic above. "I'm starting to second-guess my choices when it comes to your personality profile. I might have to reel you in a bit." Amiya's voice rang into the forefront of his artificial mind, sent as it was through the invisible space between them, in a string of super-sensible ones and zeros. All right, forget the lobotomy talk. What's up with that guy? I'm not getting any more details. You'll need to get in close. But Unijin, remember the row is strictly set to return fire. Got it. Unijin registered her words as he flew at a breakneck pace between a tight grid of high-rise structures packed densely and methodically throughout the urban space. Transport pods, shop stalls, and floating platforms flew past his head as he scanned the city's traffic monitoring systems to keep his eyes on any potential chaos in the general proximity of his destination. A large clearing in the buildings appeared in front of Unijin. He looked down and saw the large square of the park, with one white-berthed gravel pathway running down the middle of it. He turned, squared his shoulders, and flew straight towards it, leaning back as he got closer, before slowing down into a holding position. He drifted slowly in the open space above the park. As Unijin looked down upon the crowds walking around, the two circular metal discs that were fastened onto his temples receded back into his titanium skull and a pair of external lenses emerged from them. Tiny metal arms extended outwards from the sides of his head and over his custom, mechanical eyes. These were fabricated by Amiya with finely tuned precision, like a watchmaker, out of parts she reclaimed from older models. I still don't have a lock, Unijin. See what you can do out there. Don't worry, sister, I got it. The light emanating from Unijin's eyes switched from a deep, rich blue to a fiery red as he looked down upon the throbbing mass of pedestrians below. Its redness darted back and forth, like Newton's cradle in overspeed, as it searched for the man. Lock obtained. Unijin magnified its view to 25x as it pulled him into view. He was walking closely behind an old man in a faded, emerald green sweater. Naruhito's eyes darted around, scanning the crowd for threats. I'm going in. The hovering mechanoid hung high in the air, far enough above Naruhito that nobody on the ground took notice of them. The most they could hear was a faint buzz, heavily drowned out by the rainfall. Quickly, Unijin switched off his plasma propulsion system and engaged the anti-gravity pod built into the small of his back. He then floated softly down toward the ground, landing just behind Naruhito. What is that? A woman behind Unijin gasped. Naruhito turned around and saw Unijin standing tall behind him. His eyes widened like a midnight owl. Unijin dropped his mechanical jaws, allowing the piercing white light of his holographic teeth to materialize. They buzzed and pulsated as Unijin spoke. Naruhito Fujiwara, this is the Sapporo police. Put both of your hands up in the air. I love playing the official police droid game. He quickly shot his thought back to Amiya. She did not laugh. Naruhito froze still in fear as the cold rain gently pushed a lock of hair down across his forehead. The surrounding crowd slowly began to back away from him. He refused to comply. Both hands up in the air. Now. Unijin repeated. Naruhito looked around, gauging the situation. All right, something's up. This guy's not playing ball. In the blink of an eye, a chamber in Unijin's chest opened up and a finger-sized barrel emerged, pointing directly at Naruhito's torso. With a muted thump, a miniature quill flew out of the barrel and struck Naruhito in the shoulder. Ugh! He screamed, tossing his arms into the air. In a thrust of panic, Naruhito pushed the old man standing next to him out of the way and ran straight for the outer edge of the park. He's not going down, can up the potency here. Unijin looked down at his right wrist as the fingers on his hand collapsed in on themselves to form the outer rim of a massive gun barrel. In the center of it, slightly recessed, 3 streams of pink light connected together where a ball of plasma started to build. The sounds of tennis ball-sized maglev engines revved up as Unijin used the thrust in his feet to kick up into the air. He flew forwards in a massive arc, pulled his arms into his chest and twisted as he executed a full front flip. He moved 50 meters through the air and landed directly in front of Naruhito. Huh? Naruhito was stunned, frozen in place. Unijin lifted his charging cannon and pointed it at him. Rain slid off each side of the barrel. This is your final warning. The sound of his charging pulse filled the area. Naruhito's eyebrows sank, sliding down to hug the outer edges of his eyes. Slowly, he reached down and clutched the black satchel hanging on the side of his waist. Unijin watched, saying nothing, as a thick silence enveloped them like a warm quilt. "You don't know what you're doing. Please, let me go." The man's feeble voice tore into the quiet surrounding them. It was met with the terrible sound of Unijin's charging cannon. "This is your final warning," Unijin barked at him. Naruhito looked down at his satchel. "Well then, you've left me no choice." With one hand clutching the satchel, Naruhito leapt into the air, lunging towards Unijin. A torrent of plasma charge ripped out of Unijin's arm cannon, striking Naruhito in the center of his chest. The surface of his skin lit up from within, showing the dark network of veins and arteries just beneath the surface. He shook in place for a moment, like a cement mixer on overdrive, before collapsing to the ground. The satchel sprung from his hands, landing on the wet concrete. The front latch was open, and a small batch of tiny, iridescent pearls, no larger than marbles, spilled out in front of it. Unijin glanced at them and watched as each of their white lights grew brighter and darker with the rhythm of a human breath. Despite the frigid rain, they still burned like a sidereal constellation of miniature stars. And even he, through his artificial mind, became transfixed by the sight of them. The thick middle of Unijin's feet clapped against the ground, left, right, breaking the silence as he crept towards the man, knocked out and lying on the concrete. He bent down, picking up one of the miniature orbs, and battle red hues in his eyes melted into a startling, bluish-white as he peered into their deep and pacifying glow. "Unijin? Unijin. Come in, I need a sit rep." His mechanical mind ceased to take in new information as he knelt there, frozen still and immersed in the light. She said as she reached down and opened an access panel on the boxy computer unit lodged beneath her desk. Hurriedly, she flipped open the utility cover, revealing a black toggle switch, with a handwritten label plastered above it, reading "Tactical Reboot." With one hand, she held down a wide, rectangular button next to it, and with the other, flipped the switch up and down 3 times. Whoop! 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 As the reboot alarm sounded, she rolled back in her chair and slipped her rugged helmet back onto her head. "Come in. Unijin, come in." With a sudden jolt, the mechanoid swung his torso back and stood upwards. I got you. Wow, I don't know what that was, I'm not touching those things. Leave that for the real police." "Okay, good." Amiya let out a sigh of relief. "Glad to have you back. I'll have them send a team in now to assess." "Alright, listen, I." Stopped here. Next page. Behind him, Unijin heard the shrill squealing sound of electric air brakes screeching to a sudden stop in the distance. He turned around and watched as a black caravan with a short profile jumped a curb and came to a stop at the edge of the park. The side door opened and 2 men emerged, with short and nimble frames, wearing black polyethylene masks that clung tightly to the surface of their faces. Each eye was covered with a circular glass window, rimmed with thick, black metal. Through magnified lenses, Unijin saw burning balls of dim orange light behind each piece of glass. Eyes of menace. Thandas. Amiya reeled back in her chair in shock. She ripped her helmet off her head and shoved her face into her hands. Shit. She thought. It can't be. Thanda operatives? No. I can't lose Unijin. Not now, not like this. Gathering her resolve, she slowly pulled her head up and slipped the helmet back on. "Alright, grab the subject as quick as you can and get out of there. I'm calling for backup now. Make it quick. These guys aren't anything I can't handle." "No, Unijin. The Thantas have been wreaking havoc in other districts recently. They're onto something bad here. Just grab the boy and get out of there." Okay. Unijin reached down and started to pick up Naruhito's limp body. He looked over and watched as one of the men turned towards each other. He let out a series of garbled syllables, with words beyond Unijin's capability to decipher. The other one reached behind his back and retrieved a scratched-up pulse rifle, tarnished with grease stains and burn marks. Without hesitation, the man knelt forward and aimed the rifle at Unijin. I've gotta take these guys. Bang. 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 3 scorching rounds tore through the air and smashed against Unigen's armor. Annihilator rounds. Unigen, you need to get out of there. 2 of them made it through, each ripping a searing hole open in Unigen's chest, plastered with soot. Their rims burned bright orange from the heat of the armor-piercing force. Quickly, Unigen regained his stance and engaged his vertical thrusters. He soared up into the air and flew towards the 2 men. At the top of his arc, he pulled a metal clip from his hip, with 4 holes in it, 1 for each of his fingers. He slipped the clip over his hand and pulled his thumb in against the center of his palm to arm the device. Across the span of a few seconds, a telescopic rod on either side of his hand extended outwards. At the tip of each rod, a small slit opened, allowing for a rich, blue plasma blade to erupt outwards. Unigen held his hand out, with the menace of his dual, 10-inch blades facing towards the Thanas as he came crashing down in front of them. Immediately, he swung blade-shorn fist down towards the Thana holding a rifle, aiming for his neck. But the operative flicked his rifle up, blocking the strike, while swiftly pulling a small pistol from his hip and firing it with ferocious quickness against Unigen's stomach. Unigen swiftly activated his point-blank plasma shield and repelled the rounds. With a swift fist, he rocked the operative in its chest, hurling him backwards where he fell limp against the ground. But before he could react, the second operative unwrapped a small pouch and whipped a thick cloud of green powder into Unigen's face. Small clumps of the nasty substance fell into the holes torn into Unigen's chest, sending him into a frenzied panic. Amiya, it's acid. It's getting into my primary hydraulic system's power circuits. Abort mission. Get out of there. Unigen stumbled backwards and shook violently as the acidic powder reacted with the rubber coating of his internal wires and melted down into a liquid. The gears in his face spun erratically, causing his cheeks and eyebrows to twitch wildly. Pulled his hands up to his face to stop it, and then he lost control of his legs, which sent him falling down to the ground. Amiya typed furiously on her console, navigating through the dense stack of windows in Unigen's control interface. Power Systems Configuration Panel. She pulled up the access window and pulled up Unigen's auxiliary power menu. She ran it, but Unigen was still mired in his desperate struggle to stay powered on. As he lay there, twitching on the ground, his visual feed slowly dimmed. His eyes locked onto a flock of city birds departing the tree above him and fluttering upon into the sky, until his power shut off completely. Shit! Amiya cried out. As quick as possible, she switched back to the tracking drone's visual feed and took in the scene from up above. The healthy Thanda operative left his fallen comrade and was running towards Naruto. Zooming in on Naruto, she noticed he was moving slightly. He was looking back and taking in the scene behind him. It wasn't long before he realized who was there. Amiya magnified her view and witnessed the sheer terror in his face as he quickly scooped all of the dispersed pearls into his satchel and stood up to escape. Naruhito, ragged and disheveled, ran desperately for his life. His hair was in disarray, and the scruff on his face grew wildly in all directions. 2 dark, sunken eyes were stuffed in his face above pale and dirty cheekbones. They were fixed straight ahead, burning for a desperate escape from death. The tattered tan and brown rags of his clothes whipped through the air like the war-torn sails of an ancient seafaring ship. The lone Thanda operative chased after him, firing at this panicked man with a red-hot plasma pistol, missing wildly as he ran like a rabid chimpanzee. Pockets of onlookers screamed in terror and ran the other way as each shot tripped like thunder from the barrels of this feral weapon. This rolling festival of frenzied violence moved like a small stampede towards the edge of the park. As Naruhito drew nearer to his escape, with searing hot jolts of plasma rounds flying above his shoulders, he cut to the left, seeking to evade the frightening projectiles. But it wasn't enough. He cried out and fell to the ground as a searing hot, flying fist of plasma struck him in the leg. Sprawled out, with his cheek pressed against the hot concrete, he watched as the wretched man approached. A dark mass of clouds gathered in the distance, lulling the sunlight into a drowsy haze. The last thing he saw was a mud-caked boot of fingers linked from his face, standing firmly in front of him until his vision faded into a dreamless sleep.